Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This session focuses on Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I hope and expect by the end of this session, you would be able to know what does this hypothesis mean. Well, my dear students, this was a hypothesis that was for the first time advanced by or presented by Edward Sapir in 1929, and subsequently it was developed by one of his students, Benjamin Whorf. So in totality, this is called Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Well, if we try to trace who was this Edward Sapir, actually he was born in 1884 and he died in 1939. He was an American anthropologist linguist. And actually he is one of the major figures in structural linguistics. He is author of a prominent book, An Introduction to the Study of Speech. Sapir was the teacher of Benjamin Whorf, and later on they did some work on language together. Now, who was Whorf? As I've already said, he was one of the students of Sapir. But, Whorf was born in 1897 and he died in 1941. Sapir was a graduate from MIT in chemical engineering. So, by profession, he was not a linguist. And as he completed his degree as engineer, he started working as a fire prevention engineer. It is very interesting fact about him that despite his huge contributions towards the study of language, he never in his life worked professionally as a linguist. As far as Whorf's area of work was concerned, primarily his area of interest was linguistics with reference to the study of Native American languages. And actually he is very, very familiar, very famous for the studies in the language that is called Hopi language. He was actually a very captivating speaker and he could deliver speeches in a very good way, and most of his work that he did on language is available. Actually, it was produced or it was shared in the form of lectures that he delivered, in different areas. Now, coming towards Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. What is this hypothesis? According to this hypothesis, the structure of a language determines a native speaker's perception and categorization of experience. Let me simplify this for you. Whatever is your language, it would determine the way you would look at the language, at the world. So your worldview would be determined by your language. So if your language is different, your worldview would be different. So, there are certain thoughts of an individual in one language that cannot be understood in some other language. So, using one language means looking at the world, experiencing the world in a different way, and using another language means experiencing it in a completely different way. This hypothesis states that the way people think is strongly affected by the native languages that they have. Well, as far as this Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is concerned, this is a very, very controversial theory. There are certain disagreements that different linguists and sociolinguists have made with this. The principle of linguistic relativity that it has promoted, it holds that the structure of a language affects the speaker's worldview, but many sociolinguists do not agree with it. This Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, however, sometimes is known as Whorfianism as well. And as I've already said, this was first discussed by Sapir in 1929. However, when did it become popular? It became popular after, his death. Following posthumous publication of his works, after his death when his works were published, this became popular and, it was, argued about a lot in the fields of linguistics and sociolinguistics. It was mainly attacked by the followers of Noam Chomsky in the following decades because According to them, it's the linguistic structures within the language, that work or that operate with reference to the competence of a person to learn or to use a language. As far as this hypothesis is concerned, there are two versions of this hypothesis. One is a weaker version, the other is a stronger version. According to the stronger version, language determines thought, which means linguistic categories limit and determine our cognitive process. This is a very strong version of this. As compared to this, there is a comparatively weaker version of this hypothesis as well, which simply says linguistic categories and usage only influence, they do not determine, they only influence thought. Well, as far as the term Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is concerned, it is also a source of controversy, and it is considered to be a misnomer in certain ways. Actually, it was later on that one of other students of Sapir, whose name was Harry Heuger, that he introduced the term Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The idea was presented by Sapir and Whorf, but they never termed it as Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The name that was given to it was later on by another linguist who was a student of Sapir. In fact, from the late 1980s, a new school of linguistic relativity scholars examined the effects of differences in linguistic categorizations on the cognition of people. And though they did not find, for the stronger version of this hypothesis, they did not find any supporting findings which would say that, language determines thought. However, as far as the comparatively weaker version is concerned, yes, some instances were found which proved that language choices affect, how the way, or they influence the way, how we look at the world or how we perceive the world.